Hi, and welcome to GCs in the House, a podcast spotlighting general counsels. I'm your host, Lena Guo. In my conversations with GCs, we discuss how they got in the top legal seat, obstacles that they had to overcome along the way, and how they are tackling new challenges. My guest today is Jennifer Miller, General Counsel at Grammarly, the AI company whose mission is to improve lives through improved communication. After graduating Georgetown University Law Center, Jennifer practiced at Morgan Lewis and Lerman Center before making the transition in-house. She has experience at hypergrowth and large-scale companies, including HP, Cisco, Gigamon, Loon, and Starship Technologies. Jennifer is a seasoned and business-focused GC with a broad range of experiences under her belt, including working in global software and hardware businesses, taking a company through an IPO, and dealing with unique regulatory challenges. Today, Jennifer and I chat about the skills and experiences that prepared her for her first GC role, how networking is critical to career development, and best practices on getting hired. Now, onto the conversation. So good to reconnect, Jennifer. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. You are a seasoned general counsel and executive. You are so well connected in the tech legal community and currently GC of Grammarly, a company that almost everyone has heard of and its product that many people use. I think I
Yes,
read that there's something like 30 million daily active users.
indeed.
You've worked in global software, hardware, and dealt with unique regulatory challenges. And now you're working on strategic matters at an AI enabled company. So I'm sure listeners would love to learn about how you ended up where you are today. So let's dive into it.
Okay.
Where did you grow up, and how did you decide to become a lawyer in the first place?
Sure. It's really funny. I think in my heart of hearts, I always knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. So I was born in New York. We moved to Texas. We moved around a great deal when I was younger. We didn't stay in one place, even within the states that we lived in. So we moved over and over and over within New York. Then we moved to Texas. Then right before my senior year of high school, we moved to Pennsylvania. So I had to finish my senior year of high school at a completely new high school, which completely different than the private school I had gone to in Texas. So I've moved around a great deal, which I think has actually taught me a ton of resilience, even though it's uncomfortable and hard when you're 18 and going to be a senior in high school to switch schools at that point. But I think I
Sure.
always had in my mind that a legal career was something that appealed to me. My father was actually an in-house counsel himself, so has been a lawyer since I was a toddler, and I grew up having conversations around the dining room table about tax law. My dad is a tax attorney. My mom, um, who's now passed away, but she was an accountant. So there was a lot of tax discussion and financial discussion around our dinner table. And I think I was always a very good arguer and a very good negotiator. And so it just seemed to me to be something that would come naturally to me. Now, that said, I had a career before I went to law school. I came out of college at Mount Holyoke College in Western Massachusetts and moved to Washington, D.C because I thought I wanted to be in politics. I really thought I wanted to work in the government. So I decided to go ahead. Before I went to law school, I got a master's degree in political management from George Washington University and went to work on a political campaign of a person that was running for governor of the state of Maryland. And gosh, he won. It was awesome. It was such a fun campaign to be on. He became governor, and then I went to work for him in the state house, actually, for a number of years. And kept thinking in the back of my mind, at some point, I think I'll probably go to law school. But right now, this is really, really interesting work that I'm doing. After having been there a few years, it became apparent to me that the really interesting policy work that was being done at the state government level was being done by lawyers. And so I thought, okay, this is my time. This is the moment I'm going to take a break from this job that I had working in the governor's office in Annapolis, Maryland, and go to law school. And I really thought at the time that I would go back to government and stay in government as my career path. However, I got to law school. I went to Georgetown, and my first summer, between my first and second year, I actually worked for a professor studying election law, again, thinking that I would go back to government. And then between my second and third year, went to big law, started doing intellectual property and trademark work, in particular, internet and privacy work, fell in love with that practice area and never went back to government. So I've been Morgan Lewis, which was that firm, showed me a different area of law that I thought was more aligned with my interests going forward, and I never looked back.
It's also funny that you ended up in IP when both parents were very much, yeah, in the tax world, and
Oh,
you didn't.
yes. I thought about that. I did a number of, oh, dating myself when I was when I came in to be a summer associate at Morgan Lewis. I remember there was a big binder. It was before everything was online. This is what I mean. I'm dating myself. There was a big binder, and you'd walk into one of the partners' offices who housed the binder, and there were sheets of paper that got printed and slipped in to these little plastic sleeves with the details of the different assignments that you could take. And so I did start taking some tax assignments because I felt like this is in my family. This is in my bones. I know what to do here. But at the end of the day, uh, no offense to any tax attorneys at all. It didn't light me up and motivate me the way that the trademark law did, and the internet law, and sort of the tech transactions practice that Morgan Lewis had, which was pretty nascent at that point in time. I found that just so much more interesting. I loved working with brands that I could see on shelves and see online, and that really motivated me to stay in that practice group.
Sure, and that makes a lot of sense. You can kind of see the direct impact, perhaps, that you were having from your work. And so then, after practicing at a law firm, what what led you to a career in house?
Good question. I left Morgan Lewis when I was about a 5.5 year, 6 year associate, and went to a much smaller law firm that was a media and telecom boutique. And that switch of firms, I think, was the foundational element that led me to being in house, not just geographically. I'll come back to that in a moment, but practice wise. The small firm that I went to only had about 25, 30 attorneys total. And they were the outsourced in house counsel for a number of media companies at the time. And so through that work, I just got a much closer glimpse of a much wider variety of work in companies because we were so close to the business. These were some clients that I probably should not name, but didn't have large legal departments. And so they almost seconded us, for lack of a better word. And so I got really deep into understanding how businesses worked and how legal could help a business move forward, whereas I hadn't had that depth of experience prior. So after a couple of years of being at that small media and telecom boutique, our geography changed. We moved from Washington D.C. at that point, my family and I, out to California, or we talked about wanting to move to California. And we agreed that we should not do that until one of us got a job. Just given we had two children at the time, we had a dog, we owned a home. And I was very, very fortunate that I networked my way pretty quickly to a meeting that led me to a job at Cisco. And that is what brought us to California and was my first in-house role. And I've never thought to go back to a firm since then. And I've just so enjoyed being in-house. But it was that switch of geography first and foremost, because it seemed like, gosh, the place to be is here in the Bay Area for that kind of
Mhm.
role. I was coming to a point where I had to consider, did I want to try to become a partner? At what firm would I want to try to become a partner? Or did I want to really get deeper into the businesses along the lines of what I had done at that smaller firm. And that was really the work that I felt like was just most exciting for me as a person.
And that was a very good call early in your career, clearly. And so when you first made the transition in-house, you focused, of course, on IP, on trademarks. And so how did that segue into your role ultimately into a VP and deputy general counsel at a company like Gigamon?
Oh, but it's interesting. So I didn't actually start as an IP or a trademark attorney at Cisco. When I was interviewing, when I first met the general counsel of Cisco at the time, there were a couple of open roles that were, it sounds presumptuous to say it, and I don't mean to imply that I would have gotten any role that I tried. That's not what I mean, but there were a number of open roles that were available to me to interview for. One of them was to be Cisco's first dedicated trademark counsel, or I was given the opportunity to be basically the mini general counsel, if you will, for one of their incubated startups, which happened to be a SaaS startup. And it was a separate and distinct business within Cisco that was reporting directly up to the CEO of Cisco at the time, led by Cisco's former first ever general counsel, actually, who had decided not to be a lawyer any longer, but wanted to be the GM of a business. So I was very different than the rest of the attorneys at Cisco in that I did all of the legal work for this incubated startup and really was nestled and embedded with that team. So I did their commercial transactions, I did their marketing law, I did their trademark law, didn't file their patents. I did use the resources of the Cisco patent team for that, but I got the opportunity to see what it was like to be a general counsel and do all of that robust work at a really early stage, whereas the other attorneys at Cisco at the time were very niche oriented. You might have been the commercial counsel for the West region, or you were the employment lawyer, or you were the marketing lawyer. I got to do it all. And I felt like I hit the jackpot with that role.
Wow, that is incredible. And was that when you knew you would ultimately want to be a general counsel one day?
It certainly taught me that I loved the variety of that sort of role. I don't know, quite frankly, in retrospect, I don't think I said to myself, I intend to be a general counsel. I knew that what I wanted to do was at that point what my horizon was I wanted to manage people. I was this individual contributor doing all this work by myself. I wanted to manage people. I wanted to grow within a team. I wanted more responsibility for more uh, bigger teams, bigger projects, whatever it might be. And I started a women's leadership program at the time, and during my time at Cisco. And I think that is what really gave me the idea that I should and could push myself to do more. I had
Mm.
always been under the impression that if I worked really hard and kept my head down and got my work done, that I would shine and be promoted. And that's the way it is at a law firm, right? You just proceed year after year. You step up to the next level, you get a raise, it's lockstep, but it's very, very different at a company. So I really credit the Leading Women in Technology Willpower program for showing me that there's a lot more to being part of a business and being a leader in a business. And so then I started making very calculated decisions about how do I build out my skill sets, both in management as well as legal areas, so that I could eventually become a deputy general counsel and then a general counsel.
And how did you and that's clearly very smart. You put a lot of thought into continuing to grow in your career. How how did you think about how to build out your legal and management abilities? I mean, I come across many junior attorneys or mid-level attorneys who are trying to think about the next step and, where are their gaps and what did they need to do? Did you have mentors? Did you talk to other attorneys? How did you kind of
Mhm.
craft what your strategy was going to be like moving forward in your career?
Sure. Oh, I talked to everybody I possibly could. I had amazing mentors who guided me, and I tried to learn the paths that they took up the ladder, if you will, within their legal departments. And then I started realizing that ultimately what seemed to be the path that made the most sense to me was to find my way to a very small, very fast growing company where I could really spread my wings and build a team and learn about really scaling businesses. I had been at Cisco. I then left Cisco to go to HP, both excellent experiences, but very large companies. So I felt like what I needed was that very small, fast growing company. And I found my way through a connection, someone I had worked with at HP, to be deputy general counsel over at Gigamon. And I joined as employee, I think, number 220 before they went public, stayed there for just shy of 6 years, helped take them public, helped grow that team, scale that team. And then ultimately, right after they were taken private, that's when I left and then took my first general counsel job elsewhere. But Gigamon gave me that opportunity as the second lawyer on that team to really get exposure to all of the areas which I just would not have been able to do at other companies. Cisco, HP, they have dedicated corporate teams. They have dedicated litigation teams. You might get to pay attention and be part of some discussions, but I wouldn't have had the opportunity to own all of these processes so directly had I not gone to a very small company. And I think that that's often the right way for folks to get that broad-based experience.
Absolutely, and the Gigamon experience sounded invaluable, and
Oh, yes.
I'm sure in an interviewing, there was just so much material that you could work with during those conversations on building and scaling a team. But and what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome to land your first general counsel role? I mean, you were GC at Loon, a moonshot company, and so did you feel that with all of the Gigamon experience behind you, you were, it was easy to get interviews for GC roles, but difficult to land, or was that a fairly easy process first time you tried?
Really good question. I remember getting pinged by so many different recruiters at the time when I was becoming more and more senior at Gigamon for deputy general counsel roles,
Mm,
VP legal, things like that. And I kept saying, thank I s- one of the things that I always tell everybody is you should speak to everybody that wants to speak to you within reason, of course. But I feel like recruiters in particular just have such a useful view into the state of the market and what skills are relevant and important and in demand that I would take any call with any recruiter that just wanted to learn about me. And then often if the role wasn't right for me, I would refer other people to those roles. But I started talking with recruiters about deputy general counsel roles, and I kept saying to them, I will refer all these people to you, but I am ready to be a general counsel, and here's why. And I started articulating my value proposition, my narrative about why I was ready and why my experiences at Gigamon were just as good as any sitting general counsel's experience. And at the time, yeah, I had to say no to a bunch of deputy GC roles, of course, because I just said, I don't want to move over to a similar sort of company. I want the next step. And I had watched the general counsel who was at Gigamon, who was an extraordinary mentor to me, still is a friend now that we don't work together. And I thought, well, gosh, I, I could do this. There's no reason. He trained me how to do this. And someone said to me at the time, you have to know that you have to know that you're ready to take that leap. And many people don't feel ready, but you just got to try. There's never the perfect time. And then someone said to me, in terms of you were asking, is it hard? It's certainly not easy. But once I started nailing my narrative a little bit more clearly about why I felt I was ready and why my experiences were just as good, if not better, than other people that were sitting GCs, I started getting those interviews. And then I started telling my network that I was looking for a GC role. And all of a sudden, I was interviewing to be general counsel at different companies. And someone said to me at the time, when I kept saying, gosh, I keep getting, at the very beginning, when I keep getting all these DGC roles coming to me, but I'm frustrated. I want to be talking about GC roles. And this is a piece of advice I share with people all the time now. Someone said to me, don't worry, your CEO is out there. You simply have to find him or her. They are looking for
Mm,
you. You are looking for them. So just stick with it. And gosh, that is exactly what happened. I started interviewing for general counsel roles and I found my CEO. I found this tremendous partner who hired me on at Loon to be general counsel of one of the Alphabet moonshot companies. And we had a tremendous partnership that actually spanned more than one company. And that's what I tell people, you're just waiting to find your CEO. You have to click with that person and you have
mhm,
to trust that person and they have to trust you. It's just a matter. It's like with any role, you have to find the right spot for yourself. And so, yeah, it took a little bit of time, but my timing worked out so beautifully, just personally, because Gigamon I knew was about to be taken private because I was doing all that work while I was interviewing. And I gave my notice the day the deal closed and that they came off the public markets. And then I stayed for a few more weeks to help the PE firm take over and get set up. And then I left to go over to Loon. And that was just an extraordinary opportunity to be at Alphabet.
yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned finding that your CEO, and in many ways, it is almost like a marriage, right? Like you have to date many different people to find the
That's
right
right.
one. And so you did give some advice, essentially, on someone who is looking for their first GC role. Do you have any additional advice for female attorneys seeking their first GC roles? Do you think that female attorneys need to do anything slightly different?
Oh gosh. No, I don't think you have to do anything different, but I will say the things that when I mentor a number of attorneys, many of whom are women, but I would say my key guidance is the same across the board. But I will say that oftentimes women in accordance with those studies that show that often women won't put themselves out there unless they meet all the requirements for a job. Men will often proceed whether they meet some or none of the requirements, and they'll throw their names into the hat. I have a number of women that I speak with that say to me, "I just don't know that I feel 100% ready. I don't know that I know everything that I need to know to be successful to be a general counsel." And I tell people that's okay. You're never going to feel 100% ready. Even as a general counsel looking for your next general counsel role, sometimes you don't feel ready, but you have
Mm,
to just jump in if you feel like you're ready for that challenge. And I would say, so it's okay to not feel 100% ready, but just jump in. Know to make the jump because no one knows everything. So I would say stop feeling like you have to meet for women attorneys in particular, stop feeling like you have to know everything because nobody knows everything. Regardless of how many years you've been in practice, you just absolutely do not. So that is the first thing. Just jump in and try, see how it goes. But then second, you really must, for everybody, you must nail your narrative about why are you ready to be a general counsel and how has the work that you've already done translate into what makes an effective general counsel. And when I counsel people, and I'm working not working, talking with a woman now who's deputy general counsel at a company. She's interviewing to be GC, and we've been talking about preparation for her interviews, and we've been talking about how the difference in roles once you're going to become a general counsel and be a part of the leadership team, your role changes to really thinking very broadly about making the company that you've joined successful, not just the legal team. Of course, your legal team must be successful, but you must think in this umbrella way of, I'm here to help this company. And you must articulate how your experiences not as a GC, have helped your current company solve its challenges and capture its opportunities? Because that is the leadership angle that you must bring to the table as a general counsel.
Thank you. That is a really great perspective that I'm sure not everyone thinks about as they're making that transition. And so what was the transition like when you ended up as GC at Loon? Was that more difficult or easier? Was that transition harder or easier than you had expected?
For me, I would say it was certainly not harder. Was it easier? I don't know. It was scary for certain to
Mm.
be to be in that role and to feel like I was needing to build a team. I had done that. I built teams at Gigamon, but at Loon, I was also responsible for managing all of our regulatory work, our government relations, policy work. I'd never done that before at that scale. And so that I had to learn new things, but because of the extraordinary relationship of trust that I had with the CEO and the executive team there, they made it easy. And it was honestly, it was an easier place to start because I was surrounded by all these other smart lawyers at the other bets within Alphabet. So there was this environment of support where all the general counsels of the bets would get together and really help each other. And we served as our networks for each other internally within Google. And that was really, really so important to learn from these folks because we had such an amazing cohort at the time. And there were such interesting other bets, Waymo and Wing, which is a drone company, and Loon and Google X. There was just such an extraordinary community of folks that worked together to help each other be successful. And I think that just made it a really wonderful way to be a GC for the first time.
Yeah, sounds that way. Some first time GCs or even seasoned GCs have mentioned it's a little lonely at the top, but it sounds like
Mhm.
at least with your Loon experience, as you mentioned, there was such a great community kind of across the board that it sounded like you probably had some support and resources that some other you may not have had if you were at a
That's
different
right.
company.
That's right. But I will say, exactly to your point, that community can be built regardless of whether it's in your company, it's an extended company, the way that Alphabet was so many companies together, or it might be through the Association of Corporate Counsel or Tech GC or any number of different legal organizations or just people that you know. I think it's critical that you have a community that you can bounce ideas off of, you can learn from. That's how I found so many mentors and my network is so deep because I've invested in that community, and it is lonely at the top. And I think without that community, it's really, really hard to be an effective general counsel.
Absolutely. And what have you enjoyed so far? What do you enjoy most about being a general counsel?
Oh, I love that every day is different. Every single day is unique in terms of the different sorts of work that I get to do, especially at a company like Grammarly, which is growing and doing so well. And that I joined with a fabulous team in place of about 12 folks, and the team is growing. And I really love helping companies avoid problems in the first place. When I talk with folks that want to shift from a law firm to being in-house, and they're trying to figure out if it's the right environment, if in-house is the right environment for them. I talk about the different way that you must work internally at a company versus externally. Whereas if you're at a firm, you come in often after there already is a something to do. We've already decided we want to file this patent, or we've gotten this demand letter. We're in this situation that's a pre-litigation situation, or I have this contract and I need you to negotiate it. You parachute in, you work on that problem, hopefully you solve that problem for the client, and then you parachute out and you go on to the next problem. You don't really see in depth how they got there or what happens after. And that's what I love about being in-house, is helping, now that I've been general counsel at a couple of companies, taking all of those experiences and trying to make sure that whatever company I'm at, benefits from those experiences and benefits from the things that I've seen gone wrong in other places so that we can avoid them. And that feels terrific. As well as I love growing and mentoring and coaching teams. It's just something that I never expected that I would enjoy as much as I actually do. And coming in and building out those teams and making them feel invested in the company is something that brings me extraordinary joy, um, as well as doing the work itself.
I can definitely see that. Just given how plugged in you are to the community at large, and just mentoring and networking with people is just it's a fabric of who you are. So I can definitely see that you just really enjoy mentoring and building up teams as well. What is the most challenging aspect of being a GC?
Oh, the most challenging aspect is recognizing how much you just do not know about
Hmm.
all these different areas of the law that companies need help with. So you have to be very adept at recognizing what you don't know. And ideally, if you're fortunate enough to build out a team around you, many folks don't have that ability. They're just one lawyer, or maybe they have a legal team of two. But if you're able to build out a more broad team, it's really critical to recognize what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then bring in people that complement you in those areas, and people that have depth of experience in certain areas that may not be my strength. And then also recognizing that, okay, maybe we need a very specific piece of help here, and we must find the precise outside counsel that's going to help us through this matter. And I feel like the most challenging part is sometimes having to admit that you don't know the answer, but then going out and solving that, finding how you're going to learn about that, get the answer, solve the problem. And sometimes just keeping all the plates in the air at the same time. It feels like you're often juggling so much as general counsel. It's a ruthless exercise in prioritization, and that can sometimes be uncomfortable for people.
Yeah. And when it just seems like there's not enough time in the day for you to consider all, figure out what you don't know and who what you have to triage. So how do you decide what is a priority and what to delegate or to push off until, a few days or a few weeks down the road?
That comes with experience. At least for me it does. And I feel as though I've gotten through these roles, I've gotten better and better and better at that. Of course, if it's something that is time bound, it's the end of the quarter, we must get this contract done. We must escalate these issues because the sales team must meet their quota or is aiming to meet their quota, those sorts of things. And you must prioritize the things that are time bound. You have to think about the value to the company of the problem that you're trying to solve. And of course, those things that are higher value take higher priority. I, over the years, it's hard, of course, when you first start being a manager to know how to delegate effectively. Over the years, as I've done it more and more, I've gotten more and more comfortable with delegating large projects. And actually, I realized over time that that is how I got to the place where I am today. So many people delegated to me and gave me space to learn that I aim to always do the same with my teams. And so I tend to delegate a whole lot as best I can. And then I sometimes I work a lot in the evenings, I work on the weekends because, to your point, sometimes I just can't get done what I need to get done during the day when I'm in meetings all day every day. I think many of us unfortunately feel that pain
Yeah.
of feeling like there just are not enough hours in the day. But I've gotten adept at figuring that out. But I also think that half of the battle is communication with your clients, to say when they've come to you with something that they need from you or that they'd like to work on together. I tell my teams always, you must acknowledge the receipt of that email, of that text, of whatever it might be. And you may have to say, listen, I can't work on this today, but I see your email. No, it's on my list. Let's set a time tomorrow. Let's set a time on Monday of next week, whatever it might be. But just that act of communication makes people at ease if it's a slightly lower priority matter, of course. And then just trusting that you're hiring really good people and that you're going to give them the resources they need to help solve these problems. And that's the way people are going to learn. But ruthless communication as well is really, really important. And I never hesitate to say to folks, I thought I was going to accomplish this today. Unfortunately, I didn't get to it. It's going to have to be tomorrow. I hope that's okay. And if you do that in terms of that communicativeness, they start to trust you and they understand that, okay, sometimes not everything is going to, when everything is a priority, not everything can be a priority.
That is really great advice. I think for some it seems obvious, but it's one of those. It sounds great in theory, but so hard to execute.
Oh, it is. It is. And of course, you have to overlay it to your company's goals. Your OKR is what's most important for the company, for sure. I mean, that's a key part of it as well. So it is something that you learn. You learn over time. Sometimes you get it wrong, for sure, but over time you get this sort of gut feeling about what should come first and what can perhaps wait. And then the other thing I've learned is that if I'm copied on an email with a number of folks on my team, oftentimes I just will not respond. And by the time I do respond, someone else has jumped in and solved the problem. So I've also learned that it doesn't always have to be me that does it.
That's so helpful to hear, because it also it reveals your type of your management style as well, where some may feel like they need to micromanage and be the one to respond to everything. But again, back to your point about learning to delegate, it really frees up your own time and gives you some of your sanity back. And there's a lot of speculation now on how AI will replace countless lawyers in the future. So, given that you work at an AI company, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Oh, I think AI is helpful to augment the work we do, but I think lawyers, that judgment that we bring to the table, that experience of seeing things in the wild at other companies, I just don't see how that could be replaced.
That is encouraging to hear for, I'm sure, for a lot of attorneys. And you've done quite a bit of hiring yourself as well. So, and
Yes.
you and I have had discussions about do's and don'ts of applying for a job. So can you share some of your own personal do's and don'ts from a hiring manager's perspective?
Absolutely. Oh, we had you and I had this fabulous conversation about this, in fact,
Yes.
and I've done a little bit of writing on these points. And I hope to publish some of these over the coming months for sure. But yes, I think the most important I have a number of things that I think are most important, but the top one that you and I have always talked about, Lena, is that you really must network before you need a job,
Yes.
especially in the tech world. And I know that many people feel like networking, oh, it seems difficult, it seems intimidating. People feel like I don't have time to go to networking events, things like that. There's a lot of ways to demystify networking. And one of the easiest ways to do that is simply to stay in touch with the people that you've worked with over the years as they have moved on to different roles in different companies. Because if you just stay in touch with people that you were friendly with at your first job, as you go to your second and they go to their second and third and fourth jobs, all of a sudden you've got this massive network of people that know you, that know your work, and that can vouch for you. And that's just a really easy way to do so. So I think you must network before you need a job. That way it's in place, because there's nothing, as we go through some of these other points, you'll see a lot of stress comes from not having that in place. Because at the end of the day, when you do want to get in front of a hiring manager, the best way to do so is through a personal connection that can say, gosh, I worked with this person at company X. They are fabulous. You should hire them here. That's what you want this person to be saying to the hiring manager. And you just never know where the next opportunity will come from or how it will arrive in your lap. Almost every role I have ever had is because I knew someone that brought me to that company or introduced me to that company. And so I find that network of folks to be super helpful. And then I'm constantly connecting people in the network for sure. But okay, so network before you need a job. The second piece I would say is be genuine and authentic when you're reaching out to people. And what I mean by that is, especially if you're doing some cold emailing in particular, I've had a number of people reach out to me. We have lots of open jobs, both Grammarly, of course, but at many other companies beforehand. We would get hundreds and hundreds of resumes at Loon, for instance, because we were doing such cool work, stratospheric internet balloons. It was super cool. And the same at Starship after that. And I would just say, be direct, be genuine, thank people for their time. Let them know if you're reaching out to them to ask for an informational interview. Don't presume that they're going to give you the time. Ask them and then say thank you. Say, I'm reaching out. I know we haven't been in touch until today. I'm reaching out about this. Might you have a few minutes to talk with me? I've had people come and say, I've applied for your job. Please let me know when we can have a conversation. Okay, well, I don't know you. Um, I'm not, that doesn't seem genuine or authentic to me. I'd love
Right.
to hear a little bit about why you're interested in the company that I'm at and um, why I should take the time. And then I would say, so do the work yourself. That's another thing I always say to people. Apply online. Do that. Take the work away from the hiring manager. I've had people send me their resumes and ask me to upload them into the system because they're trying to get, I think, that referral in. And that's, I'm happy to do that for a few people, but gosh, it just becomes unsustainable. So I would say, apply online and then reach out. Oh, and then the last thing I would really say is please tailor your resume and seriously consider including a cover letter. So we've been hiring a great deal across Grammarly, which is wonderful. But the number of resumes that we get that are not tailored to the opportunity are surprising. So if you're applying for a role in a certain area, make sure that you highlight your experience in that area. And then if it's not immediately apparent, I know people poo-poo cover letters, but I do believe they actually serve a purpose, especially if your resume is not immediately apparently tied to the role at hand. Explain why it is. So for instance, if you're if you're interviewing for a commercial role, don't have your contract negotiation listed in the 6 of 8 bullets, for instance, because in this sea of resumes that people upload online, that will be overlooked. You really need to explain why your resume tells that story. So here's another example. We were hiring for an intern on our team, and we asked people to please explain their interest in technology. And a lot of people didn't. But those that did were those were the resumes we looked at. So tailor your resume
Mm.
and consider including a cover letter. And then I would just simply say, um, of course, leverage your network to get referrals where possible. That referral is coveted because that's the way in. That tells the hiring manager that this person that's referring you in has worked with you and knows your work. And that's why that network before you need it is really, really important. And then I would lastly just simply say, please proofread your resume. It would be and proofread your cover letter and your email to the hiring manager. A number of people don't do that. And to me, in a profession that prizes conciseness and clarity, that's just a red flag. So maybe you want to use Grammarly for that to check your resume and make
1000%.
Yep.
Those are all really, that's all fantastic advice, Jennifer. And all I would say is if ever you get sick of becoming a general counsel and you want to become a recruiter instead, you've got it you've got it down. You know exactly
All right.
all the right advice to give to
Cool.
people.
Oh, and I
Um,
guess lastly, I should say send a thank you note. That's the next thing, even if it's short, just to say
yeah,
thank you. I
yeah.
think that's really important.
It's all these little, I think it's all of these little acts that show that as a job seeker you are really interested in the company and that you care and that you it just shows that you are putting in the thought and effort as well.
That's
They go
right.
a long way.
That's right, and showing that you really want to be at that company. I
Yes.
when I'm looking to hire people, I want people that aren't simply running away from something or a company that they're unhappy with. That becomes apparent very quickly if you feel like the person's just looking for any other job. I want the person to want to work at my company and on my team, and to be able to articulate why, and ideally to do so before I have to ask them why.
Yes.
And that's part of that narrative and part of that pitch, and that comes back to when you're interviewing, you must do a tremendous amount, especially if you're interviewing to be general counsel or a senior lawyer in particular. You must do a tremendous amount of research on the company, on the challenges, on the people, on the industry, so that you can have those deep conversations, and then you can articulate how your value will be meaningful to them.
Absolutely. And in interviews, it shows that
Oh,
you've
yes.
done the research, and that enthusiasm and that passion does do come through. It, I know we're coming up on our time here, but in your current role, what keeps you up at night? What legal issues? What future, big looming issues keep you up?
Oh, I would just I think it's probably anyone that's in our space feels similarly. Privacy laws constantly evolving at national levels, at state levels. It just continues to be um continues I don't think it will ever slow down, actually. It just continues to be a rolling thunder, if you will, of new laws, new regulations, AI acts, things like that, thinking through how all of these things will affect all of these businesses as we continue to mature the regulatory frameworks. And what's really important to me is that regulation does not get in the way of innovation, and making sure that companies have the ability to grow and thrive in these exciting times where technology is just advancing so quickly. And so I think about those things a lot, as well as just how do we protect the company's innovation and make sure that we're continuing to to grab that value and show that value to our customers.
Yeah. And with all of these issues and news and regulations constantly coming out every day, how do you stay on top of it all? How do you kind of dis- discern what's important, what needs to be flagged, and what's just noise?
Oh, sometimes it's hard to know actually what's just noise. So you really have to start to read quite a bit. And I started when I joined Grammarly, I started asking folks at my office, what do they read? What do
Mm,
the leaders of the different, what does my head of product development, what does my CEO read? What does our chief of staff read? I ask for guidance. Tell me what you're reading so that I can read the same things, so that I can be up on the industry trends. Of course, on the legal side, fortunate to have a stable of law firms that produce great content and updates and things like that, so that they just land in my inbox and I can read about what's happening with non-competes or with the EUAI Act, or whatever it might be. I rely on those firms to give me insight into what's happening and how these things might affect our business. But I read a ton of newspapers, newsletters. I stay on top of what our investors um, are posting as what they care about. So you just have to be very, very curious and read a tremendous amount.
yeah, that makes sense. And so between being a GC, busy hiring, mentoring, and networking, do you have any time left to decompress? And if
Mm.
so, what do you do?
Oh, well, I try to make time to decompress, because what you forgot to add was I'm married, I have 2 sons and a dog. And
Yes.
so all of those things together, and many, many friends that I love to spend time with. So I, what I do to decompress is I love to walk, I love to hike, we love to travel as a family. So if we ever get the opportunity to do that, we do that as a family. Our sons are 20, almost 21 actually later this month, and 17. We love to travel as a family. And then when we do travel, we try to do things that are outdoors in nature. We hike a lot. We hike, we ski, we do these sorts of things together, and it's been really meaningful for us. But in the short term, if we're not traveling, I think the best thing I do to decompress is take my dog for a walk. We're so lucky we live near a park. He loves to play in the park, and if I can walk for a couple miles every day, I also work out with a personal trainer, which has been tremendously effective, because you cannot you can't concentrate on anything else except your workout, and that's just freeing from the constant thinking that goes on in our minds. But I love to read a good book and I love to cook. And so when I do all that and I can do all that for friends and family, nothing makes me happier.
Those all sound sublime, and I'm so glad to hear that you are taking good care of yourself because
Oh,
working
thanks.
around the clock is not sustainable and not healthy for anyone. So, and now that we're getting into summer, I hope that means more walks and more outdoor time for you as well.
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. There, you shared so much super, super helpful and useful advice, and I really enjoyed. I mean, even though we've had many conversations, I really enjoyed just hearing everything encapsulated into one conversation. And again, I'm sure our listeners would can have so many takeaways from everything you've said. So thank you for
Oh,
your
well,
time.
oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me to be with you.
Thanks so much for listening to GC's in the House. I hope you enjoyed this episode and will join me next time for an in-depth discussion with another general counsel. I welcome your feedback and recommendations for guests. You can reach me at lguo@mlaglobal.com. Please also reach out if you have any questions or comments about today's episode. Until next time.